Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, ensconced in the DMV, and I'm not really sure where Brian is.
Brian is in Shreveport, Louisiana. Good
Okay,
morning.
still down there.
Yeah,
How's the weather?
leaving Friday. Waiting, my sister's coming tomorrow, so we're waiting to see her.
Okay.
Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at this thing today, and like, yeah, we like that dog face pony soldier bit. Then I'm gonna switch that order one, so that it'll all come. You're doing.
It's
You're
got to
doing
come
great.
at the end. I mean,
You're doing great with that, but sometimes it's like it's maybe better actually to see it. All right. Well,
All right.
how was Christmas?
Oh, that's great. We had a big dinner and a bunch of relatives over, and the food was outstanding and people were outstanding. A lot of fun.
Weather is okay.
Well, it's getting better. Yeah, it's seasonal here now. It's in the high today. Will be somewhere in the 50s. I think it's in the 60s tomorrow. So
yeah, so the weather is kind of mirroring what we're getting now. I think it's going to hit 48 or something like that, and we're going to have about, I don't know, I think about 10 days of 45 to 60 degree weather here. So
yeah, Doug Kammerer, one of our local weathermen up there, all the weathermen did their winter prediction, and he said he thinks this will be one of the 2 or 3 warmest winters ever in DC.
I
can live with that.
Yeah, I can live with that. And
you have to listen to a little more guff about global warming or whatever, but I don't care. I'm fully experienced at ignoring those people now. So
that's right. Like I said, I think before, is that if I don't have to open up the box with that snow blower in it my son bought me, I am fine.
There you go.
So it can stay boxed up for another year. I will be fine with that. Yeah, that is, when you're talking about that too, I was looking in the Wall Street Journal. They were talking about this deep freeze and some of this weather we have this bomb cyclone thing going on and whatnot. But they referenced Bjorn Lomborg, who is written frequently in their pages, talking about the number of deaths from heat versus cold.
Exactly, that's a big point he makes.
Right, and the figures are about 8 times. I mean, cold.
Many more people die of cold than die of heat.
So this is a danger zone here, type of thing like this. And I was listening to a podcast, and they had a guest host in, and it's a conservative overnight thing. And I just thought I wanted to see what the guys were doing. They had a guest host fill in, and the guy's in Nashville, and they had a heck of a time with this weather. The guy who was supposed to fill in got stuck on the road trying to get out to the studio or whatever. And so the other guy filled in from his basement studio until the other guy could get in. And I think the guy spent well over 2 hours just stuck in traffic in there. But this other guy was saying today or yesterday that, what they, the Tennessee Valley Authority put in a rolling blackout, and they told everybody it was going to be 15 minutes. And he's kind of like, okay. So he said, I'm going to time this thing, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes later, they got their power back, and he pointed out, he says, what's wrong with this picture is that the Tennessee Valley Authority has gone from, a few decades ago of over 40%, of their electricity being generated by coal to 14%. They've climbed onto this goofy, green energy, solar energy, wind energy, all this guy. We have to have clean fuel, and they've cut back their coal, and they wind up with this thing. It's like, oh well, actually, it doesn't really generate enough, electricity to heat. Whereas like we were fine with coal.
That's right. So we have enough coal for several centuries.
Yeah.
Let's leave that on the ground, be cold. One of the things that's coming out in all this, the Twitter files, all this stuff that's coming out, is like, they don't want electric vehicles to succeed. They don't want they want you to do with less. And there's a depopulation, angle to this. So if people die, that's like, it benefits the earth, as far as they're concerned. So like keeping people alive and happy and flourishing is not their goal, right? Now, when we think of policy goals, we think, what will allow the most people to flourish, to make money, to enjoy themselves and so forth. And that's not what they're after, right? So when we're, it's not just a different approach to the same goal. They have a different goal. They're trying to make it hard on you. They're trying to make your life less meaningful, less fun, I guess, for lack of a better word, less enjoyable, right? They don't want you to drive. They don't want you to, heat your house. They don't want you to eat foods that, you want to eat, right? It's like, it's just keep turning you down until you are miserable and you are unhappy and you are unhealthy and you go away.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have, once again, I mean, we're old enough that we have seen just this onslaught of things that have happened in our lifetime, and particularly the last 10, 20 years with all these environmentalists and all, which spans the gamut. I mean, it's not just the energy thing, but you were mentioning food. I was watching, I guess on the news this morning, they were doing a thing from Consumer Reports about, these chemicals, this PFAS stuff in your cookware. All right. And so they do this real science, they go through and they scrape off this thing from some of these copper, pans and all this kind of stuff. And they're rating them and things like this. I'm thinking like, I'm pretty sure with this and with this whole thing with 3M not going to use forever chemicals anymore. It's like, we've been using a lot of stuff for a long time. It hasn't caused like 1 million deaths. Right. Right. And so it's like all of a sudden it's like some small little percentage is like, oh, well, there's some kind of chemical in this cookware. We must warn of the dangers because one person in 2 million might die from this.
That's like the remember the thing about the shampoo years ago? There was something, it was like Head and Shoulders, one of those. It caused cancer, but you had to get the cancer from it. You had to wash your hair 98 times a day.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I like my hair to look good, but I'm not going in there 98 times. Oh my gosh.
He's off this week. He actually has time on his hands.
Yeah. Look at there. Yeah, they never sleep. And they're trying to, they are loading up people now. They're loading up these organizations, right? They're going around passing the hat, right? Because I think they feel some slippage, right? I think people have started to realize that, the Earth's not warming, and the things we're doing to counteract it are way more expensive than the problem they're trying to solve. That's the point you were talking about Bjorn Lomborg makes. He doesn't say there's no global warming. What he says is, if you line up all the problems we ought to be spending money on, global warming ranks way down there and does not, merit the economy stopping garbage that we do to try to combat it.
Yeah, and we get a winter like this that they're having in parts of the country, and particularly in Buffalo, and there won't be any real discussion about global. They kind of changed the discussion for a while. They don't want to talk about that and the lack of energy and electricity and all the other things that we were fine with and had capacity for. But it is this constant harangue by these things, And then the other day, Channel 4, News 4, NBC News 4 was reporting about they found a whole bunch of used tires dumped somewhere, in Anacostia, under a bridge. Okay. And they got a bunch of people out, and they got it cleaned up with some volunteer help from some local watershed outfit and whatnot. But the guy, one of the guys that they interviewed on there, what does he label this? He says, This is environmental racism because they're dumping this in the poor neighborhoods, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, they have identified a suspect who's like some 56-year-old black guy, who was hired by somebody to dump tires somewhere. And I'm like,
you have environmental laziness, is what you have. You're supposed to take them somewhere else, and this was more convenient.
It was a convenient spot for this goofball to dump the tires if he is indeed the guilty party. But it's like, okay, so racism continues to play a part everywhere. It's like you put some garbage somewhere in a poor neighborhood because it was convenient. But, if you're caught, it's, you're not going to just be fined for the dumping. They're going to charge you with being a racist for doing it in a poor neighborhood.
That's right.
As if the poor don't dump trash in poor neighborhoods.
Right. That's the other thing is that's one of the things that happens in poor neighborhoods is there's a lot more litter.
Yeah.
Right. Not just a little more, but a lot more. It's like the most of the litter problem left in America is in poor neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, the extremes these guys go to just is, I don't know. It's just mind numbing. Anyway, what I did want to talk about first here for a little while was just, thoughts about 2022. Now that we're coming down to the last few days, it's been, I don't know if it's gone quickly or slowly, but it's almost done. And so we're heading into the new year, but there've been a lot of stories. I mean, I put down things that, some of the bigger stories, obviously the war in Ukraine, inflation, energy prices, the red wave that didn't really happen. Other thoughts about things and how are these stories? I mean, what are your big stories? What do you think the effect was, if any, on us?
So big stories. I think, to me, the Twitter files will end up being the story, looking back 5 or 10 years from now will be the story that made the difference this year. And I say that because, that's the mask is off the institutions, right? They cannot deny that the FBI forced tech companies to censor information about the election, right? You can argue, MRC has done this research where they say it's pretty clear that if what was on the laptop was known before the election, that just what is verified by the New York Times and the Washington Post on the laptop was known before the election, Trump would have won, right? So, and other people argue with that. That's okay, but it's safe to say that election would have looked a lot different if that story would have been allowed to be published. And that story was kneecapped by the government, right? So the government controlled by, at that time, Donald Trump, right? So what happened there was people in Donald Trump's government turned him out. Okay, they conspired to get rid of him as president. Okay? So that's a big doggone story to me, right? And so I think that I don't know. There's these other things that happen there, but I think to me there's the complete loss of faith in the IC and the FBI and the CIA. It's like, what do we do about these things now? Can we have an IC? Can we have an FBI? I think about this and I'm like, FBI, there's some things that they can do. There needs to be some kind of, coordinating agency for certain kinds of crime, transnational crime, human trafficking, drug distribution, right, on the big scale, that probably a federal police force is helpful with. But I don't know, I think that we're approaching the point where the downsides exceed the benefits to the point where maybe we don't do that. Maybe we do, because like they have regional drug task force and stuff. It's possible for law enforcement to organize itself without this big federal thing on its back. The elections are obviously, they're always a big story. I don't know that we came that far from expectations on the elections. They took the House. They competed in the Senate. You think about, we were supposed to win all these races, but almost except for Pennsylvania, right? You're running against an incumbent. That's extremely hard to do in America today, which is another thing we need to think about. But like the advantages of incumbency are substantial in the American electoral system as they are now. So, Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire, Georgia, you're running against an incumbent in all those cases. So yeah, they're lost, and some of them were narrow losses, some of them not as narrow, but you're running against a wall there. So it's hard to do. So that's one. Let's see. Inflation, basically the economy has stopped moving, right? The stock market is shedding value. Inflation is eating up any wage gains that are out there. It appears the Biden administration is lying about its job creation in fantastic fashion. Like last month, they claimed 1.1 million jobs created. It was 11,000 in the entire country, according to the head of the Philadelphia Fed, who may be Arkansas-ed any day now, because he's coming out and telling some truth. I think the one reassuring, the best thing that happened in 2022 is that the truth is starting to come out, right? And the ridiculousness of mindless Trump hate, of over prosecuting grandmas who were in the Capitol on J6, things like that. The global warming ridiculousness is getting exposed. So to me, that's the most promising thing of 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about this whole January 6th investigation, that committee, the longer it was investigating, the more farcical it got. I mean, it just you can see, and the media was clinging onto this because as you have mentioned, there is a big Trump hate, anti-Trump movement. Here we are 2 years after the presidential election, and the vitriol from the left is still there. But they also know that he's the great boogeyman. I mean, that they use him, they can probably get some people behind them. But as time goes on, it's less effective. I mean,
right.
Trump's popularity, seems to be waning right now. So you can't use that, as much as you did in the past. And we've been talking about this, on the show, all these different facets of it. You have, they're issuing their final report, but I mean, really, what did they accomplish? I mean, it's like, why do we have these committees that were set up that were purely political? They were doing nothing, but it was a purely political, event here to try to get Donald Trump. And they really came up with nothing, all this fuss about, he's hiding his tax returns and all this stuff.
Yeah, they got his taxes, and what's there? Nothing.
Yeah, right. And they're going to release him on Friday, and it's like, why? I mean, what is he? Where's the criminality? What are you exactly doing there? Because you're mad.
And let's stop on that one point. Okay, we consider tax returns in this country to be private matters, right? And only exposed in extremely controversial whatever situations, right? This is not, we don't put people's taxes out against their will lightly in this country. But in his, they felt a right to his taxes. There's nothing in the law that says that, although there's a bill before Congress now to make presidents show their taxes. So I don't know where that will stand, but they are trying to make that happen. They may have even tried to throw it into one of the omnibus, right? So if they do that, that's fine. But that wasn't the case with Trump. He wasn't required to show his taxes. And, a guy like Trump, he's being audited every year. People are looking at his, you can't trust. The IRS has already showed you that they will do criminal things to get at Trump, right? All the lowest earner stuff. So if they had something, you'd already know it.
Right. And the thing is that they, along with the media, talk about as if this was they kind of made it feel that it was some kind of law that Trump had to do this, and that by not doing this, he was committing some kind of criminal act, kind of thing like this. The audits, the criticism, the thing about the audits is just like, well, this is not written in stone in some law. These are things that they do, but any blame on the audits, it's like, well, if the IRS didn't really do the job on the audits, that's the IRS's problem. What is that Donald Trump's problem? And taxes, our taxes are private information. You release those voluntarily. And Trump did not want to do that, partially because I think because of these audits, and it's an ongoing, it's a years long process. When you're a businessman like him that has got as complex business entities as he does, is that releasing them was really not going to do a lot of good. It wasn't going to shed a lot of light on anything, and there was no final determination, through the audit, at that point in time, of anything anyway. Nobody was going to learn anything, so there was really no public benefit for this at all. But but Trump is being held. It's like, okay, we're going to fix this. We want to get this enshrined in law so that all future presidents will have to do that. Some will probably, the future presidents probably, most of them probably go along with it.
Most people voluntarily do it.
Yeah, they usually do. But there hasn't been
no one really looks at it, right?
Right, but some in the media, but I don't care. I really couldn't care less about it for the most part. And it's just like Trump. There hasn't been a president like Donald Trump. No one has had as complex finances as Donald Trump has had. So the ordinary guys, from Jimmy Carter and whatnot, people who have not had this humongous business interest and huge income, throwing out their tax return there with relatively modest income, not a big deal. I mean, you're not exposing a lot of things anyway.
Right. And one thing that interesting has come out about this is like all these politicians added, exponentially to their wealth by serving in Congress, like, making millions of dollars a year on their $174,000 salary, right? Trump lost money. So when you say like who was ripping off the government, like the guy who lost money probably is not the guy who was ripping off government.
Yeah, well, when that figure came out that he was worth less than he was when he started.
Yeah, a lot less.
Right. Nobody was really talking about that, right? It's like because the narrative that they were waiting to pounce on was how much he profited. I mean, how many times did we hear about all the dealings with the Trump Hotel and all these kind of things? Like, he's all this, he's doing all this stuff. He shouldn't be doing this stuff because he's worth a lot less than he was when he first started. He didn't do this to make money. He gave away his salary, right? He turned it, and things like this. He did a lot of things that, presidents just don't do, whereas every president basically, and, virtually almost all the, the major players in the political realm, the senators and congressmen who get into that leadership and they're somewhere in that top, third or whatever, book deals, all kinds of things. They get radio shows, TV gigs, whatever.
Yeah, and if you look at those book deals, like Obama, it's basically just a way of funneling money to them.
Yeah,
right. It's not they're not there. There's no expectation by the book deal, by the book company, that it was going to make back its money on that advance it paid to Obama or his wife, right? I mean, they're not. Oh, we're going to give you $6 million to write this book because the book will bring in 10 million. The book ain't bringing in 10 million, right? They know that. It's like someone gave them that 6 million, and that's how they get it to those people without it being a bribe or whatever.
Right. I mean, and I think, there have been a whole slew of congressmen and senators that have had books out while they're still in office.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not top guys, but it is a way. And so, the publishers probably like, okay, we'll sell some books because this person's got a name, at least in their home state, and they can use it and pitch that as they go along in their home state. But broad national appeal, most of them probably don't have that. So are they going to, they give them a modest advance or whatever. And, and then they don't really worry about whether or not the book sells 1,000 copies or 50,000 copies. It's that wasn't the real end goal. Right.
That's right.
So, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah. So, we just have all these stories. I mean, the inflation thing where, there's certain aspects of it that are kind of cooling, but, in some ways, but overall,
we're down from 6 times the rate of inflation when Biden took office to 5 times the rate of inflation.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a very modest drop, right?
Yeah.
Barely imperceptible, because as you and I, head to the grocery store or to a lot of other places, it's like, we're not seeing it. I mean, the avian flu has really been just like wreaked havoc with the egg prices, and the administration doesn't have an answer to a lot of these things about
baby formula. How long is
baby formula
going on, right?
They thought they were going to solve that problem, and they haven't solved that problem. We had record, gas prices and things earlier in the year, and they finally are starting to come down, but it's kind of plateauing right now. I mean, I think, we've seen some movement, but we're not seeing huge drops at this point in time. But
right. And how did we achieve that? By selling off the Strategic Petroleum Reserve,
putting it at its lowest in 40 or 50 years.
Yeah. So
and we're going to have to replace it at some point in time,
right? At a much higher price. Trump bought all that oil. He was trying to fill it all up at, when gas was $1.80 a gallon. Oh no, can't do that. Trump's stupid. Going to be a lot more than $1.80 a gallon when they get ready to fill it up now.
Makes me wonder if they've got some plan of some concoction of where they're going to have a strategic wind farm and a solar farm reserve or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, like the quality of life measures in the country since Biden have taken over have all gotten precipitously worse, right? Crime is way up, inflation is way up, energy prices are way up. Inflation would be even higher, but like the core things that used to comprise the inflation rate have been removed, right? I mean, they don't count food and energy anymore. So, I mean, that's what we buy is food and energy. So, why would that be in the inflation measure, right? So you have, they put in liberal prosecutors. They don't want to prosecute anybody. They want to let people, what they call urban camping, right? Where you go in these cities and, there's tent cities for miles, down the major thoroughfares of a lot of American cities now because they don't stop it. They just let people sleep in the street, They don't make you get housing. They have all these mentally ill people who are not doing anything about. We're over $100 billion given to Ukraine now to fight its war. And, they got attacked by Russia and we should help defend them. I agree with that. But, Russia did not dare move against Ukraine or anybody else that we had an interest in defending when Trump was president, right? They stayed in their box. They behaved. And as soon as the weaker successor was installed, they went right to work. You remember, it was about 3 weeks into Biden's presidency when he said, hey, America, Russians are putting a lot of troops over in Ukraine, right? It was 3 weeks, right? He waited 3 weeks after Biden got in. I guess he made sure that none of the election suits were going to prevail, right? And then he went right to work on it and he didn't do that against Trump. He didn't want to mess with Trump. But with Biden, he knew he could get the whole invasion done before Biden had the courage to react, right? And wherewithal or whatever to react. So, yeah, it's a lot more than 20 cents higher here too. So, yeah, you're still 40 or 50% over the original or what it was when they took office, like 50% hike, right? It's coming down. It was worse, right? But you're not helping, don't tell me that you're cutting my price. You're still raising my price.
Yeah, there's so many factors in there, and I do want to clarify for any listeners out there in terms of, we have a number of inflationary reports to come out. I mean, one, as you mentioned, I mean, there's a report that shows like overall inflation. There's another one that says, excluding the volatile food and energy. They've done that for years, so you get kind of pictures like if you include food and energy, it's this. If you take it out, it's this. Some years food and energy, are relatively benign, and so the difference between the two is very little. These, this last year or so, it's definitely been a bigger drop. Then they have the producer, the PCE indexes, and they've got producer prices, all kinds of different things for people to look at and try to figure out. But the end result still is that we're all paying more for virtually everything compared to a year ago by a significant measure. And it's hard, except for this Christmas season where a lot of these retailers were overstocked and they were discounting heavily to try to get rid of, the inventory in their stores. There weren't, you still don't have a lot of things that were at prices from before. My wife continues to shake her head when she goes to the store, just thinking about what the price of something was, some food was a year ago versus now, and even with chicken, she was doing something, she couldn't find, the bone, the boneless chicken that she was looking for. She had to actually buy the boned-in chicken and then debone it for the event that she was, serving food at. So
that's a timely thing, especially if you're doing it. And she had a group deal,
Yeah, and she did a lot of that during, when things were a lot worse, because, chicken was really hard to find in any form,
Right.
and just things that you just don't think, we've kind of taken for granted that it would be there in plentiful supply. Looks like the supply chain has kind of worked a lot of the kinks out. We don't have the huge backups in the ports like we did before, but it still hasn't, we still have this problem of, wages. Inflation has pushed up wages, which pushes up all the other costs, which also means that whatever we're buying is going to cost more. And so it is, we're kind of stuck here. I mean, so we have to get used to this newer level of higher costs of a lot of products.
Right. They've said, okay, your life is going to be worse and you're just going to take it. That's the exact point. 401ks have lost a third of their value since Biden became president. The stock market has lost almost a third of its value since Biden became president. There's the VC, the capital formation people are all struggling. It's like the things that get us out of recessions, they're also hurting.
Yeah, massive. I mean, we've had a mass, and we're continuing to see, lots of, tech layoffs. Some of those are finding jobs, but I mean, we're seeing layoffs like we haven't seen in quite a while in the tech industry, because that whole area has, they hired more than they needed to during the pandemic, and then they wound up being bloated with this. But some, at some point in time, how are you going to absorb all those people, with all of this? And yeah, as for someone like me who's now largely left to live off my savings and investments rather than employment, these kinds of things, do sting a little bit more, because you're like, I need the appreciation in the securities in order to give me some buffer, in here. And when all those things are happening, it's here's Spencer again. Spencer's very busy today. He's filling in for Bob today.
Yeah, where's Bob?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, he's right. He's right too. Yeah, and he does, and but it just, I guess he's thinking about running for president. That'll be good. That'll be interesting. That could work.
One of the things I was thinking about, because Kamala Harris is, I keep, just shaking my head about her, and we talk about, in football you have the Mr. Irrelevant, last person in the draft. I mean, it's like, is Kamala Harris the equivalent of the last person drafted almost? I mean, she's got to be one of the most irrelevant, VPs I have seen. I don't know.
I think when you see those Dems in 2024 polling, she's first if they don't have Biden in it, and she's second if they do. So if Biden doesn't run, she will start on the inside, right? She may well be overtaken. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like, if Biden doesn't run, who runs? Who do they have who could win a national election?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and as you mentioned before too, with the power, you have the advantage, the power of the incumbency. Now, she's not the incumbent as president, but she has been, by serving, she has
can claim whatever success they
right, and they already
are able to claim.
You can put a campaign structure team together and things like that, and use that. I don't know exactly what she campaigns on per se, that she says, what a great job I've done as vice president, but she does have the advantage. Any VP always has, generally will have the advantage, just like a lot of cases, lieutenant governors would have the theoretical advantage, in running for governor. It doesn't.
There's this idea that like they're huddled in a room and the two of them come up with stuff and brilliant ideas and help us all. But it's like she has nothing to do with the ideas coming out of the Biden administration.
I do think that Republican presidents, though, at least in my lifetime, seem to have made a bigger effort of utilizing the vice president than the Democrats have.
Yeah, that's true. I guess Gore was used to some extent, but then I guess there was a feud sort of between them, so he kind of cut Gore off. But yeah, the vice presidents have been important. Bush was important to Reagan.
Yeah.
Dick Cheney, obviously, he ran the W. Bush White House.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was more in charge than the president was. And Pence had a lot of role. Pence was in charge of the COVID response.
Right. Yeah. So I think there are a lot. I think they seem to have a little bit more of a prominent role in a lot of different things. And I mean, Biden gave Harris the border, and it doesn't work out at all.
Yeah, and she went close by one time, looked over, and said, "Yeah, it's tough. Gotta go."
All right, let's just talk about some of the other current issues. So obviously, this is a story for all of 2022, which is this war in Ukraine, which Putin slipped. Whether or not Putin actually slipped and used the word war, whether or not that was, I think we've all know this is a war. I mean, this is a military battle. There's material out there. There's you name it. There's troops on the ground. There's shelling. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. But is Putin bending a little bit about, negotiation here, having a summit? I mean, or is this just smoke and mirrors?
I think he's looking for people to talk to. I think that's his best chance of getting this to be his sort of back to his narrative, is to get it to negotiations, and then he can, tell lies about the negotiations and so forth. But, they're already saying, it's the Ukrainians who refuse to talk. And it's like, well, this is the first we heard of you guys being interested in talking. But, so it's, he's going to go on for this as long as he can. But I think the internal pressure is building on him to make it in one way or the other. And I think that his leadership core has said, we're not going to do this with nuclear weapons. And I think that he is not in a position to overrule them. Like a president here, if Biden decided he was going to nuke something, he has the, it's his order to give, right? We all recognize that. But if all of his, staff and national security people and all that stuff were saying no, he probably would not do it. And if he went to do it, there would be people that stepped in and tried to stop it, right? So I think that's kind of where Putin is now, that he is the entire, organization around him is saying, we're not going to nuke our way out of this. That brings more harm to us than it's worth. Figure your way out of this, right? It's crushing our economy. We can't sell our fuel or our agricultural products abroad. Everybody's going broke here. You're sending these untrained soldiers to die, and almost every Russian family is touched by that at this point, and it needs to stop. So I think he's under a lot of domestic pressure to make this in, and I think he's looking for an off-ramp.
Yeah, I mean, there was another article in the Wall Street Journal the other day talking about Putin and how the loyalists that surround him, their thing was, we need to report good news to Putin about what's going on there. So, even where areas that they were having trouble, defending, they were trying to take over, defend things, Putin's out there. It's like, no, you have to keep fighting. And, soldiers are like, but we're losing, and if we keep doing this, we'll all get wiped out, to the point where there are areas where that's what happened. The troops basically decided to withdraw. They left behind, bombs and, bullets and bodies, because, otherwise they would have been totally wiped out. But, it's like there was no one, close to Putin that was going to try to tell him, by the way, this isn't going the way you want to go. They kept feeding him all this stuff. And it was almost like he was emboldened by this. It's that Putin ego saying, okay, well, we're going to, because we thought that we had this in 3 days, not in almost a year's time now, as it's slogged on here. It's just, Putin needs a way out, and he needs to do that without losing too much more face, I guess, at this point.
Right. And so the search now is for a way to give him face, right? Yeah. Which can't be, you can't leave any soldiers in there. You don't get to keep Crimea. You don't get to keep Kherson. Your deep water port dream is again dead for now. So, those are the biggies, and he can't get any of those. They can't let him have any of those. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. They don't owe him any sovereign territory. I guess you could say, but I guess Zelensky's put out a list of what he'd be looking for in this deal. And I think that list is sort of a, we can knock off a few items and you have your face, right? Like one of them is, they want to put on trials for, war crimes and so forth. It's like, if you fight the Russians, there's going to be some war crimes, right? The Russian military philosophy is to commit war crimes, is to not just defeat a region militarily, but to go in, rape, pillage, and plunder, and make the people miserable. That's part of their tactic of war, is to ruin your country socially as well as strategically, right? So, it may be just like, you walk out of here, we're done, right? And that may be what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. I mean, it makes sense to go ahead and create your big list, knowing that some of these things are not that important to you, and that, but if you give something back to Putin, you can say, well, I got these concessions, so we're okay, and but then it ends the misery on both sides, which which I think we definitely want to see the Ukrainian people get back to business here and get their lives put back together and everything, and rebuild all the cities that have been destroyed through this war effort. I'm going to switch now real quickly to China and to COVID and everything else. They've now announced that they're going to lift these quarantine restrictions on inbound travelers, and so I mean it'll take a little while for like the airlines to ramp up to be able to bring people in and get to like a pre-pandemic level. But China has been. I mean, they've decided that zero COVID policy wasn't really the thing for them. Now they decided this. What's going on?
Well, one of the things that's going on is that inbound traveling from 20 to 21 dropped from 670 million trips in and out of China, international trips in and out of China, to 120 million. 670 million to 120 million. Okay, so that's basically a fifth, right? Or less than a fifth. So that's a big impact. That's a lot of Chinese jobs that are no longer there because of that, right? That's a big blow to their economy. So that's part of this. Their productivity is off the charts downward because of this, and they've decided that the social unrest plus the actual outcomes no longer justify this kind of thing. What tipped the balance? I think the protest. I think they realized that they really didn't have enough soldiers and so forth to keep putting down this revolution, that they had to give or they were going to lose their country. So, it was weird because there was a couple of weeks there when, Russia and China, the two biggest geopolitical foes we've had since World War II, were both teetering on the edge of not existing in their present form anymore. That looks like it's going to be a little more stable now, but it does look like the Chinese are having to back off and on the COVID stuff a lot and just treat it like other people did.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of, as you kind of mentioned there too. So I've always had a strong belief that economic numbers that China has reported are, you got to take that with a lot of grain of salt there, because that there's the communists. They're going, they're going to talk about all this stuff, and so the world says, oh, look at this, China's this great growth engine, but then when they release numbers during the COVID era, the numbers are down, but they're not down like to our levels, right? I mean, right. And so he's like, those numbers are also not being reported accurately. But I think all these changes between the protests and the lifting of these things, as you mentioned, this huge drop in traffic travel in and out of China, it has hurt them brutally. I mean, they have suffered brutally, not in the numbers that they report, but this is a telltale sign, I think, of like, we can't go on like this. We have to do something because the economy's in shambles.
Yeah, like you were talking about the airlines, like the airlines, as a result of this huge cut, right? They can't fly empty planes in and out of China. That's a long trip, right? So those planes have been reassigned elsewhere. So now they're in a situation of like, you got to wait for the airlines to say, okay, we'll give you some planes back. We'll start those trips.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good segue into a brief foray into Southwest Airlines and their complete meltdown of this travel season. Southwest has always been known as one of the best airlines, most efficient airlines in the United States. They've had a few blips, here and there. I mean, the pandemic caused a lot of changes in the airline industry. Really, the taxpayers, poured in tons of money to keep them afloat. All the airlines. Southwest, I've flown it a lot, or at least a lot more lately than I did before. My wife's flown it quite a bit.
The price differences have gotten between them and the other people have grown, right?
Yeah. And so, it's the thing, part of this, I mean, the weather definitely was a big problem. I mean, they fly out of Denver, they fly out of Chicago, they fly out of Baltimore. I mean, we didn't have the bad weather here, but it is a ripple effect, right? Everywhere, when the bad weather starts in one part of the country, because of the way things go, it affects the entire flight schedule. So lots of other airports got impacted in their wake. A lot of the bad weather, is now kind of behind them, but now they're in a catch-up mode because they've got other issues. And one of their equipment, their airplanes aren't in the right place, their crews aren't in the right place. One of the things that Southwest has done and prided themselves on is just how efficient they are with their scheduling of their planes and everything like this. So, a plane flies in, it empties out, 30 or 40 minutes later, it's, they're being refilled and then, they're on their way to another destination. And so, they have very little margin for error because of the scheduling of how they have managed their fleet. And so this has been an absolute disaster for them. Just so many different factors in there. And I mean, there are passengers that have been in an airport since December 21st.
Yeah.
They haven't, they didn't get anywhere for Christmas. Now they're trying to get home, and it's slowly coming, together, but it may take days. I mean, I think the CEO of Southwest says, early next week, they should be okay. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And part of this is, the other thing about Southwest is unique, of course, was the culture, right?
Right.
It was run by a guy named Herb Kelleher, who was, he gave speeches all over the country, and his only requirement when he gave a speech was that he had a wild turkey on the rocks on the dais when he was speaking. He sipped wild turkey while giving his speeches. So, but he was a guy, he was man of the people, right? He took care of the employees, took care of the passengers. They were very customer service forward facing organization, really led a lot of airlines into a better age of customer service, right? And he left and replaced by a, cookie cutter CEO, look at the balance sheet, cut all the expenses, this and that and the other. And so now you have a workforce. It's like, you're down on your luck, and we're not inclined to help because when we're down on our luck, you weren't inclined to help. So that whole cycle of trust that Herb Kelleher built within Southwest, which kept Southwest running a lot, right? It enabled it to overcome a lot of the things that knocked out a lot of other American airlines, is gone, right? It's just run by a regular old CEO who, has the regular limitations of CEOs, and, that they're paying a price for that.
Yeah, I mean, Kelleher made flying fun, right? I mean, he had incredible employee loyalty for that, and all the things that you can't stay there forever. And he left, and he's passed on since then too. But I think you're right in terms of the subsequent replacements over time now. They're probably on maybe their third or fourth CEO since Kelleher's time. My experience with Southwest is just that I don't see the fun element that used to be part of their hallmark. It just seems like I'm flying any other airline except for the fact that they have the unique seating format of how 24 hours in advance you got to be on your computer, on your phone, and get your boarding assignment, unless you've paid money now to get to the A group, the 1 to 15 group. And so you're fighting with all these other people. But other than that, the open seating, so when you board at B20, you pick any open seat, right? You're not assigned to a specific seat. So that's kind of nice. But the flights I've taken, I'm like, okay, they've been fine, but they haven't been, where's all that fun stuff I heard about a long time ago when I wasn't flying Southwest? I don't know that the employees feel that it's anything more unique than being working for American or Delta or United anymore. Yeah. So they have the same. They're getting labor disputes as well, right? So it's just not what it used to be at all for that. Border crisis. We talked a little bit about this, but the big thing here was Supreme Court 5-4 ruling to keep Title 42 in effect. They're going to hear arguments on this in February. Neil Gorsuch voted with the liberal minority, but he made a good point. I think is that it's like you can't keep having this forever. I mean, it was Title 42 was, Trump era was for the pandemic, kind of thing like this. And they need to address the policy issue, which the Supreme Court saying is like, we're not here to take care of this policy, in terms of the border policy. The government should be handling this, right?
Right.
And that's what they're not doing. So I guess Biden, in some ways, gets a reprieve to try to figure out what to do at the border. But come February, I mean, I don't see where the Supreme Court says this ought to stay in effect. The government's they've got to enforce the border.
Right. The government's got to enforce the border. And I agree with Gorsuch, and I agree with that you got to quit hiding behind COVID on this. Just come out and protect the border. Right. They don't want to do that. It'll be a big issue in the 2024 election. My guess is it won't go well for them in the border states. Right. But I mean, and I guess there was they made news the other day. They sent some more people from the border to Kamala's house. Right. And the leftists got all mad. But you know what? It was colder in El Paso when they left than it was in D.C. when they got there. Nobody's pointed that out, but the temperature was actually lower when they left than when they got there. And if you look at El Paso now, I mean, the mayor of El Paso has declared a state of emergency because the city is overrun with illegal immigrants, right? They're sleeping on every street in the city. Right. And Eagle Pass, there were 3,300 people crossed at Eagle Pass last night. Right. 3,300 people walked across the border into the country altogether illegally last night. And it's like, that's too many. Right. And so the Border Patrol, they go get them and process them and so forth. But I mean, this is out of control. And the reason it's out of control is Biden immigration policies. Right. This is Joe Biden failing the American people and the immigrants. The other thing about this is that doesn't get talked about enough is the system he is condemning them to is horrific, right? They're handled by coyotes. You pay, some of the women have to pay with sex, right? Kids are abused. People are separated from their families. This is an awful system, right? And you're perpetuating it by, he came in, what did he do? Trump had this straightened out. He had deals with the Northern Triangle countries to make it where fewer people wanted to leave, jobs were provided and so forth. He had a deal with Mexico to guard its southern border so that we didn't have to spend so much guarding our southern border. All that thrown out on the first day of the Biden presidency. Okay. So, this is their fault and it is a human catastrophe and it's not going to change until someone comes in and actually implements some immigration policy.
Yeah, and I will give CNN a tiny bit of credit this morning because as much as they were kind of playing the violin thing about these poor immigrants, they had focused on like a mother and daughter who had crossed and they were all wet and freezing cold and all this stuff. So you get all the sob story there. They did say that anticipating Title 42 end, these people were basically massing at the border.
Yeah, right. And they're saying, there's 3,500 a day, 7,000, 6,000 a day. Now, when this comes down, it'll be 15,000 a day, right? People are pouring across the border when this ends. So it is a catastrophe. And I guess it's okay that it got stalled a little bit because Biden, they do need to come up with a plan. And I think there are people in the Biden White House that understand that 15,000 people a day pouring across the border is not going to redound to their benefit. And they're working on something to do about this. And they do need some time to figure it out. No, Title 42 needs to go away. There's no more COVID emergency. I don't want to live under COVID rules in any aspect of my life, including that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of doublespeak for the administration in the sense of, they say, yeah, we want Title 42 to end, but they don't have a plan. Right. So they need Title 42 to stay in effect while they can formulate a plan.
Yeah, I mean, you have the other thing you got to remember about this administration is they have a lot of people who have no clue what they're doing in key jobs. I mean, no clue, right? The transportation secretary has no clue about transportation. The Interior Secretary has no clue about the interior, right? These are people that they're completely disconnected from the consequences of their policy choices. Like for instance, you're having, as we talked about, like back when it was warm, there are natural gas problems in the Northeast, right? There's people having trouble getting natural gas and home heating oil in the Northeast because of FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, rulings on pipelines. So what the FERC says is that if gas travels through a pipeline, then the maker of the pipeline is responsible for the greenhouse gas addition to the atmosphere. So like if you're paying your carbon credits or whatever. So they're trying to make it where it's unaffordable to be in the pipeline business. You're not creating energy in the pipeline business. You're just taking it where it's needed, right? So, but they want to charge those people for the consequences of the energy use. That's ridiculous.
All right, we got to wrap this up. Last word.
What do we have on here that we did not do? I think the George Santos story is hilarious. If we're going to kick him out of office, then we got to kick out Elizabeth Warren and a whole bunch of other people. So, there's a lot of them who have lied about what they did. Joe Biden can't be president anymore. God knows, now 3 degrees. I was in the top of my class, whatever. Let's see what else was on here. Kari Lake gone and not coming back. I think we know that she's not going to win. And I think it's because she didn't win. Twitter files, I think, as we said, I think that's the story of the decade. That's a clear path of what we did. What else is here? College football, I think it's Georgia.
They look good. Yeah. Is it going to be? They're going to play Michigan.
I think so.
Yeah.
And that'll be hard for me to pick because I like the SEC to win. I like to be able to say my team is from the team that won the team that knocked us out won the whole thing. That's, you always want to do that. Right. But the Michigan coach, I don't know if we talked about this before.
We have talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to root against him.
Yeah.
If he'll raise the babies.
All right. That's it, folks. Thank you for joining us again. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Don't anybody tell you otherwise. God bless America and Happy New Year. And we will see you actually in 2 weeks. We'll be off next week because I got more stuff. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Brian, for joining me, and a safe trip home.
All right. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.